Hello, everyone.
Closer to it, maybe.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I guess you guys are wondering what these little cards are. Okay. During the candidates' responses, you guys will have the green card to hold up if you like the response, and the red card to hold up if you don't agree with it. Okay, we have coolers in the back that have waters in them, and I wanted to first give thanks to the people that put on this event. Thank the Illinois Federation of Teachers for let us hold this at the facility. I want to thank the women from Southwestern Illinois Democratic Women, Indivisible, Illinois 12th, as well as Action Metro East and Our Revolution. Also want to thank the candidates, David Bequette and Brendan Kelly, for participating tonight. Unfortunately, Charles Cohn couldn't make it tonight. We also have upcoming events, an upcoming event sheet that has each of the participants in here. I'm sorry, it's a little nervous. Each of the groups have upcoming events. Indivisible will have a protest on January 8th. In front of Mike Bost's office, you would like to come out, as well as a Women's and Economics Forum on February 17th. Also on January 14th, Action Metro East will be having an online caucus. You guys also can be a part of that as well. And just to let you guys know, SWID will be having a meeting on the first Wednesday of each month at 6:30 p.m. That's everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more thing.
Well, you guys have to have the rules, so I'm sorry. Okay, for the candidates, the candidates will have 3 minutes to respond, and moderators reserve the right to ask a follow-up question for 1 minute. There will be 3 rounds. We will also have a break after round 2. One of the questions that was given to each of the candidates was to take home to give more of an in-depth reflection of what, a more in-depth response. Meanwhile, candidates were also allowed to submit 2 questions that they would like to ask their opponent. We will not identify which of those questions that they were given. Do you want to reread it?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go.
Okay, your first question is, 3 times since the 1970s, we've had the GOP demand no deficit spending by Democratic administrations, followed by deficit-busting tax cuts in Republican administrations. How do you plan to break this cycle and get us back to a fiscal responsibility that also provides for sorely needed investment in Main Street and not Wall Street? I guess we'll begin.
Just pick.
Okay, I guess we'll begin with David. Would you begin?
Sure. So this is a great question, because when we talk about deficit spending and deficit in general, we've got a $1.4 trillion tax scam that's on the table right now. And we know that this is designed to make the rich richer. It's designed to go to the 1%. And it's going to overall hurt the middle class, working class, and of course those in poverty the most. And we also know that there are ways to create a tax program and a tax system that creates new jobs actually puts a surplus in the economy and doesn't add to the deficit. And I think one of the greatest ways to do that is talk about gender wage gap. A new report just came out from McKinsey that said that if we remove the gender wage gap, that we would actually add $4.3 trillion to the U.S. economy over the next 10 years. Imagine that, $4.3 trillion added to the U.S. economy just by making pay equal. And to do this, we would only have to spend $475 billion over that period of time to create 6.4 million jobs for women. Higher paying jobs for women, better paying jobs for women, and of course, equal paying jobs for women. So there are plenty of ways that we as a country can create a tax system that creates more jobs, that doesn't add to the deficit, and doesn't give a huge tax break to the 1%, and at the same time gets rid of a huge moral and social problem like gender wage gap, creating new jobs for women and creating more equal jobs for women. So that's one way. And then of course, there's other ways where we can create jobs without adding to the 1%. I got a green. Nice. So there's other ways to add to this without enriching the 1%, and that's by infrastructure. You know, our taxes are supposed to go towards social good. They're supposed to go towards healthcare. They're supposed to go towards education, and they're supposed to go towards infrastructure. What happens when we do infrastructure and build? We create jobs, and that adds to our economy, and that doesn't add to the deficit. That actually adds to the surplus. So if we look at it, we can create better jobs for women, equal pay, and we can create jobs for working class Americans without a tax scam that enriches the rich and damages the poor in the middle class and the lower middle class. Thank you.
Well, that first question, it kind of covers the entire evening of what we want to talk about. I mean, that's a catch-all, and I certainly hope that we get a chance to come back to the bits and pieces of it as we go along, because I think that's the ultimate question, is how do we make an economy that works for everybody? And if you have an economy that works for everybody, you're going to have a balanced budget. That's certainly part of the equation. Let's talk about the elephant that's in the room and current events. Of course, the tax bill is absolutely the preeminent thing at the moment. And why is it problematic? My kids and I, we love watching that show, Stranger Things. And part of the scary world of Stranger Things is the upside down. This tax bill is upside down. This law that was passed is the exact opposite of what we needed. Do we need genuine reform? Absolutely. Do we need some reform to our tax system? Is there a serious, legitimate debate and discussion we need to have as a country about how we fund government, particularly in Illinois, all the way up to the federal government? Yes, we have to do that. But what they have done is the exact opposite of what this country needs for its future. This tax bill is a tremendous missed opportunity. The debt that's going to be added to our national deficit, and the debt that not we will pay, but that our kids and our grandkids are ultimately going to have to pay, is the exact opposite of what we need. For us here in Illinois, that tax bill, what Bruce Rauner has now characterized as punishment for the people of Illinois, that is what my boss has voted for. A bill that punishes the people of Illinois because of our state and local taxes. That exemption, which will now stop at $10,000, sure, there's a few folks that fall under that category who won't have to worry about that. But the folks that are in that other area, particularly businesses that are making a calculation about how small businesses, how they're going to be able to afford to operate and employ people, that is going to hurt them. There are some weird and perverse incentives which have been put into this tax bill, which the idea is to bring money back from overseas, back to the United States. But the way this tax bill was written, it will send money to overseas. There are incentives within this bill that will have these guys sending money back to other countries instead of coming back to the United States. The people that win out of this tax bill are the tax lawyers, the CPAs. They are very excited about it. When the Republicans were polling this and deciding how to sell this piece of crap, what they did was wrap it within the idea that they're going to simplify it. This did not simplify anything. If anything, they have made it more complicated for people. And that is a complete betrayal of what they said they were going to do. So there's a lot of things that are wrong about that. It's a completely upside down policy. But they have told us what their values are, which are in a sharp contrast to what our values are, by which tax cuts expire first. The people who are in the middle class, their tax cuts will expire. The people who are working for the rich corporations, the people that are the rich corporations, they get a tax cut forever. They have told us what they stand for by what it is they prioritize.
Thank you both. Due to the $1.5 trillion deficit imposed by the recent tax bill, pay-go rules will trigger cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. How do you plan to defend these programs in the face of Republican efforts to enforce austerity on the backs of middle and lower class constituents? We'll let Brendan go. Sure.
Well, I think that's the ticking time bomb that in this tax bill. That is the bait and switch that they have done by passing this, which creates a tremendous debt. There are rules in place now called the sequester rules. There are automatic cuts to Social Security, Medicare, other programs, and not just those programs, but other programs which cross the political aisle in terms of the programs that have appeal. There's some real concerns about how this is going to impact the Farm Bill. There's real concerns about how this affects victim services for people who have been victimized by crime. There's going to be automatic cuts to those things because of this deficit which has been created, the debt which has been created by passing this tax bill. So what I will do is try to get into Congress and work with folks from both sides of the aisle to undo the damage that has been done. That is a big fundamental part of the problem with the way this bill was passed. We have learned in our experience over the past couple decades where both parties have made some bad policy decisions because it was one side or the other cramming it on one side or the other. There was not a bipartisan consensus. If you looked at the tax reform that was passed in the 1980s, where it was Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, people who can't agree on anything, where they got together and they tried to pass some tax reform, at that time, it passed 98-2. And so whether it succeeded or failed, everybody owned it. The country owned it together, and if there were problems with it, they fixed it together. The way the Affordable Care Act, the way they have politicized the Affordable Care Act and tried to tear it apart, we're going to have further instability, just like we have in the healthcare market. We're going to have that for businesses because there's going to be a whiplash, as there should be. There should be a backlash to what's occurring with this bill. But those changes are going to, again, create a lot of instability and a lot of unpredictability for middle-class families. We have to be going forward. We have to get back to the regular order of governance. We have to get back to building consensus as a country. Whether it's painful or whether it's uncomfortable, and some of us don't get exactly what we want, we have to be deliberate about reaching out to the other side, building a consensus again, and hopefully we can get back through that. I think that is desperately what people want. If you look in places where there are red states, where people are voting for blue, they are voting for normalcy. They are voting for people that they can trust, the people that have some judgment, the people are thinking rationally, and they're making logical, informed decisions based on the evidence. We have to get back that, and whatever the policy is, whether it's tax policy, whether it's our spending, whatever that policy is, we have to get back to that regular order and that way of governing again. It will be difficult in these very divided times, but we have to make a concerted effort to do that. And I think then we'll be able to repair the damage that has passed, that is going to be impacting programs like Medicare. We have to fight tooth and nail against cuts to Social Security and Medicare.
This is a great question because when we talk about what we're talking about tonight, which is the economy, this is all leads up to, why is the economy so important? What does it do? Why are taxes the way they are? The reality is, we as a country need to start looking at why we pay taxes. What are taxes for? And in a developed country, in a modern country, in a human rights-based country, taxes should be about taking care of people. Taking care of people that are less fortunate. Taking care of people that need things in times of need. And taxes are designed to provide for basic fundamental rights and needs. Roads, infrastructure, healthcare, education. So what would I do when I get in office and look to take care of this problem, which is this tax scam that's going to get rid of so many basic needs, I would fight it tooth and nail. I would get us back to understanding why we have taxes. I would get us back to fighting for jobs, creating jobs within infrastructure fields, science and education, research and development. I would look at looking at programs for equitable employment for the African American communities, for women, and killing the gender wage gap. When we do all of those things, we can happily pay taxes knowing that we all have health care, knowing that we all have education, knowing that our taxes are going for those basic fundamental needs. See, here's the big problem with the tax scam. They try to tell you you're going to get $2,000 or whatever it is more. Well, guess what? That's at the risk of losing so many of the basic goods and needs that you have. So you're not getting a tax break. You're getting everything ripped from you. You're getting education ripped from you. You're getting healthcare ripped from you. Now, imagine you didn't get that $2,000 back extra, but you had healthcare. You had education. You had all the things that you should have coming to you as a resident and a citizen of this country. That's much bigger and much more invaluable than any tax break. So that's what we need to start focusing on as a country, is what are our taxes for and why are they so important?
I'd like to exercise my right to ask a follow-up question, if I may, of David. Because this is something we hear a lot from just about all politicians, and that's that they're going to create jobs. And you mentioned it in your answer. Will you talk about how you're going to create jobs? Because that's the piece that's often missing, is how is that going to actually work?
This is a great question. I'm surprised this isn't one of the big ones. But yeah, we should be asking, you say create jobs, how are you actually going to do that? Well, let's take Southern Illinois as a great example. We live in a district that is extremely diverse, and I'm proud of that diversity. But we also live in a district that has been raped, basically, of many of its jobs. And part of that comes from what's called the resource curse. We've been so dependent on fossil fuels, on coal, on these resource jobs that we stopped looking forward. We stopped looking for ways to fill the gap. And as a congressman or anybody in public office, when they're looking at how do we create jobs, well, we have to start looking forward. And we have to start creating jobs in places like infrastructure. We have to get that money that's promised to us. We have to start looking for jobs in new technologies, renewables, biotech, clean tech. So that's how I would create jobs in those spheres.
And Brendan, if you want to.
Sure. I think that there's great consensus and there's a tremendous opportunity for the country in terms of investing in infrastructure. And I think we can have more questions about that, and we can talk about that probably for a half an hour in terms of the opportunities and the needs that there are for infrastructure here in Southern Illinois. I hope we talk about that more. That literally is the path forward for Southern Illinois in so many parts of it, and I think once we continue, I'd like to talk about that more because it's a long list of things. But another component of being able to make sure that we're moving into the 21st century and we're not living in a 1960s economy here in Southwestern Illinois is making sure that we are matching our educational system to the skills that are actually needed. We have a tremendous network of community colleges, John A. Logan, Southwestern Illinois College. We have great private universities. We have public university in Southern Illinois, Carbondale. Those are some built-in resources that we can build on in terms of making sure the skills are there. But that also starts at the lower education level. We can talk about that more because it is not just about college level skills. It is also about those skills that are the skills that are not college level that we need to be able to prepare for the future.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, speaking of infrastructure, analysts believe President Trump's infrastructure bill will provide hefty kickbacks for existing projects, rather than investing in new projects. How do you plan to ensure that any infrastructure deal benefits every American and isn't just another big tax giveaway to massive construction firms? And I'm sort of confused.
I think it comes back to me.
Okay.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
This is a great question. So First of all, when we look at infrastructure spending in general in our country, we are at a 6-decade low compared to the GDP in infrastructure spending. That's insane. And yet, our infrastructure needs are greater than they've ever been. Now, how do we battle the fact that this could be a corrupt system when you start funding infrastructure? Well, first of all, we have to fight to get infrastructure spending. We're not getting it. Second of all, once we get that infrastructure spending, we need oversight. I think one of the things we've lost along the way, both in DC and here in Illinois specifically, is this idea of oversight, of looking at where money's going, how money's being spent, who it's benefiting. There has been less and less oversight in the last 4 decades in the state of Illinois and specifically in our country than ever before. We are patting people on the back. We are doing favors for them. We are putting people in office to do favors for them. And all that comes back to one simple thing. We have too much money in politics. We have an entire political system run by PACs, super PACs, special interests, corporations. And why do you think there's kickbacks when all this happens? Why do you think there's a contract that goes to somebody for construction? Well, because they funded their campaigns. And it happens all throughout this country. Every day there's checks being written, thousands of dollars and millions of dollars being funneled into politicians so they cannot make honest decisions when they go to DC. They make dishonest decisions. They make decisions based on donors and not constituents. They make decisions based on money, not on your lives and your livelihood. They make decisions based on their pockets and making sure that they stay in office rather than doing what's good for constituents. And I think we fix that fundamental issue of money in politics, we'll see a lot of issues change. Not just the corruption, not just the oversight, but we'll see issues from healthcare to tax reform to the gender wage gap to dealing with ethnic problems and our racial issues. We'll see all these go away when we rip money out of politics.
Yeah, I agree. That's a fundamental part of all the problems that we're dealing with, and I think it'll be a challenge in terms of the infrastructure bill that is being proposed by the people that are in power now. I'm very concerned that the bill that they are talking about, the proposal that they are looking at, is really just a gift to contractors. It's more tax incentives, tax breaks to, in theory, stimulate economic development and investment in infrastructure. What we have to fight for is hard dollars invested in infrastructure. And those hard dollars, they have to have strict oversight. They absolutely have to do. I can tell you that as a state's attorney, I've had to prosecute cases from when we had the stimulus funds that were passed back in 2008 by folks that in our own party, and those dollars were wasted, and they were abused, and they were the source of corruption. So we need to, not just in terms of our stimulus, in terms of infrastructure investment, but any funding that we are going to fight like hell for to get from the federal government, because we need our fair share. Because more comes from Illinois to the federal government than comes back from the federal government to Illinois. So that is a tremendous failure of our current congressional representation. We send more money there than we get back, and that's not the way it's supposed to work. But we need to make sure that there are some strict rules and that we are not subsidizing local corruption, that we are not subsidizing wasteful and useless layers of government, which we have too many of in Illinois. We have to admit that, we have to confront that, and we can't let the federal government continue to subsidize that problem. That's not just, it's not just an infrastructure, but it is a part of the infrastructure oversight that we have to have. We've got to make sure, we have to fight that those jobs that are going to infrastructure will be good union jobs, that those folks will have protections in their work. And we have to make sure that the minority-owned businesses are getting their fair share. There are folks that are ready to build, that are ready to go to work right now, but they are passed over because exactly what David said, and we've talked about many times together as a group, people in this room, the corruption that it comes from money in politics. I'm very honored to have the endorsement of End Citizens United, a group that has been fighting for this issue for years. I've been fighting for this issue also. It's something that is at the heart of some of the problems that we have in this country, if not all the problems that we have in this country. But that is part of what we have to do in terms of infrastructure. We have to make sure those infrastructure jobs are going to union jobs, they have good protections, there's safety at the workplace. And we have to make sure that we have a plan that we know what the needs are of this district. We can't simply go out there and say we're for infrastructure. We're all kind of for that. There's a consensus there. But we have to know from top to bottom what the needs are of this district in terms of infrastructure, and it's very, very specific. There are limited dollars. We have to be informed. We have to know what's going on with the specific needs and find those pinpoint things, those things that are going to result, that cause a catalyst for development that are a part of the infrastructure needs of the 12th Congressional District. And we have to have that and be ready and be able to fight for that. I'm very concerned that we are not. And we're going to get passed over yet again here in Southern Illinois.
Student loan debt is now the second highest consumer debt category, behind only mortgage debt, higher than both credit card and auto loans. What specific legislative remedies would you support to ease this burden on college graduates?
I tell you, it is disturbing to me that our federal government right now is making money off the interest that people in this room and people all over this community, all over the 12th Congressional District, that they are paying on student loans. We want our people to be educated. We want folks in this country to be able to move up the ladder. And we have a government that is working against them and making them pay for the privilege of being able to get an education. And that to me is a fundamental problem that we have to address. That'd be the first legislation we need to pass in terms of being able to right the wrong there in terms of the cost of education. And I think we also have to look at how we make the availability of higher education more available to other folks. I would like to see a great expansion of national service. And that does two things for us, okay? It's not just a ladder towards being able to afford your education, but it is also a way for us to have a common experience as a people. We look back on the greatest generation and the hell that they went through to save this country and to make this the world that it is, which is a better world than it was during World War II. They did a lot, but they had that common experience, that sense of national purpose that bound them together because they all served. They all served. And whether you were a Democrat or Republican in Congress, you had that common experience. You all served. You all believed in the great American project. And people don't have that anymore. We're all living in our own little blue bubble or red bubble or our urban bubble or a rural bubble, reading whatever it is that they want us to read on Facebook and Twitter that is, constantly reinforcing a certain point of view because of that lack of common experience. So I think you can do two things. You can heal the divisions in this country through a national service project, but you can also, that can be the ideal ladder for people, one of many options. It's not the only option, but one of the options for people to afford to go to college. I was able to afford to go to Notre Dame. I don't know how I got in. It was some kind of computer error, I think. But they let me in, and I made it through, but I was able to afford that outrageous tuition cost because of Uncle Sam. Because I served the country, because I did Navy ROTC. And I'm sure David probably provided the GI Bill too, and that paid for some cost by being a Marine. That experience, that will be one of the ways forward, I think. We can talk more about education, but that is one of the avenues to be able to access higher education. Serving your country, not just in the military, but as a teacher, in civil air patrol, in any type of health care, some sort of community service. The needs are long. There's plenty of opportunities to serve, and that would be one way for us to be able to help people access higher education for the government to pay for that. Thanks.
This is a great question because I'm sure at least half this room has some student loans. We have, I don't know, it's probably like $73,000 now, something like that, student loans combined. Because even after the GI Bill, if you want to keep going, it runs out eventually. Here's the thing. I'm not comfortable with Americans paying anything for college or trade school or any type of education because there's only proof that when you go to school to get a degree or to get a trade license or a certification, that it's better for the economy. When we have educated people working in our economy, it's better. That's it. It's simple, and there are working models all over the world in the other developed countries throughout Europe where citizens do not pay for an education. They go to school, they get great educations or trade certification, and they go on and they become very productive members of the society. Now here's the challenge. Even if we were to remove interest rates from loans, you're still walking out with a mortgage. Why are you walking out with a mortgage? The reason why this new generation is not buying homes, is not getting the quality of life the baby boomers received, is because they all have a mortgage already without anything to back it up except for a piece of paper. Now, of course that piece of paper is worth something, but the jobs that they're going into right now aren't covering the $400, $500, $600 mortgage payment or student loan payment that they're making. And pulling the 9% interest rates from that isn't going to help. So we can talk about ways to remediate all of that student loans, but the reality is we should know as a country that proof is that the more educated we are, the more productive we are, the more economically sustainable we are, and the more our economy benefits as a country if we're educated. So there's no reason. It should be just like healthcare, should be just like the roads we drive on. We should all have the opportunity to go to tertiary education or trade school without worrying about taking out another mortgage.
Okay, so that's the end of round one. So between round one and round two, we're going to give the candidates time to introduce themselves if we didn't get to that in the very beginning. And so we'll give each one of you 3 minutes to kind of introduce yourselves to the audience.
All right, I'll go first. Thank you very much to everybody who helped organize this. This is exactly how it's supposed to work. That people are participating in their democracy. If there's anything good that has come out of the turmoil that this country has experienced recently, is that people are awake, they are paying attention, they are actively engaged, and some of that can be difficult, some of that can be uncomfortable, some of that can reveal things where we may think about, we felt a way about one thing and we want to, maybe after we hear what somebody has to say, we feel a little differently about it. That is a good thing, and that's the way democracy is supposed to work, and I'm encouraged by that, and thank you all for being here. It's really a wonderful thing to see you all participating like you have. My name is Brendan Kelly. I've been the elected state's attorney, county prosecutor here in St. Clair County for about 8 years now. Before that, I was an assistant prosecutor. Before that, I was in the United States Navy. My family came to this area, like many folks in this area, came here because of Scott Air Force Base. My mother and father were career Department of Defense officials, worked their entire lives for the Department of Defense, and this is the place we wound up after living all over the world. And when I was in the Navy, I served all over the world, including in the Middle East, but this was the place that I wanted to come home to. My wife and I met in the 6th grade. We sat next to each other in homeroom at Wolf Branch Elementary. That's the one that, the building that didn't go into the mines of science. It's the one that's still standing. And that's where my oldest son, who's now at the University of Kansas, where he attended, where my youngest son is now attending. Because I believe in Southern Illinois. In my heart, I know that this is a special place. The people here have impacted my life in ways that have made me the man who I am. Whatever good I've been able to do is because of the people of Southern Illinois, because they have always been the kind of people that believe in this country. We're right in the middle. We are right in the middle, both geographically and politically. And that's a good thing. That's the kind of place that I want to be. We have a chance here in this district to be the glue that binds the country together again. And we can find a different way forward, where we have to break the mold of this constant back and forth that we have. The pendulum may be on the end that we like, and the pendulum may be swinging on an end that we don't like. But we know that in the end is not good for the country, and that's, for the past 20 years, we have had folks in both parties making decisions that have put us on a very dangerous path. And my feeling is that, I think like most people can feel, that we are at a turning point in this country, and that all of us, everyone in this room, had to step up and participate and contribute and make sure that either we're going to be something else or we will be the country that we have always loved. So that's why I'm doing it, and I appreciate you all doing it. I'm sure you're here for the exact same reason.
By the way, this is my favorite room. I've been here quite a few times. I like this room. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everybody, Happy New Year's. Yeah, we can say Christmas, apparently. We proved it in a room full of Democrats. So I want to, first of all, thanks everybody for putting this together. I think we both attest to the fact that, you know, answering questions that are very direct and about a certain topic is comfortable for both of us, even though it shouldn't always be that way. But it's certainly an important time, and coming on the heels of an incredibly deplorable tax bill and tax scam, this is a perfect event to be at. My name is David Bequette. I am from Columbia, Illinois. I've had the privilege to do many things in my life. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, social venture entrepreneur, however you want to call it. I've also had the opportunity to wear many hats, both supporting my wife while she was doing her PhD over the last, I guess, 5 years it's been or something like that. You know, first of all, I'm a neighbor. You know, I've been in and out of this district over the last 10, 15 years. Doing lots and lots of things, serving in different places, and you know, no matter what, this is always going to be my home. And I'm so proud of this area and this district because it's diverse. We don't realize how diverse it is until we start going out on the ground and realize we are the most diverse district in this country, in the Midwest, outside of the 9 counties of Chicago. That's how diverse we are. We don't realize that, but we are. And for me, that's a sense of pride. And along with that comes a sense of obligation and a sense of duty, because we have so many different people to represent. We have so many different cultures and people and ways of life that we have to represent. And one of the reasons I'm running is because I feel like my life and my journey along my life and my career has allowed me to be more representative of a different and broad spectrum of people. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm running. That's why I'm so proud to be in this position, and proud to be in this room, and proud that we're going to have a competitive and incredibly, I think, I don't even know the words for it, but we're going to have a primary, you know, which we haven't had. So we should all be excited for that, and that's going to be an exciting thing. And I'm excited that everybody's getting involved and being a part of this, because this is an exciting part of our history. We have a chance to right the ship. We have a chance to be more progressive. We have a chance to flip this thing so much that we start to get things done that we never imagined could be done. And I really appreciate everybody in this room, and I really appreciate being here. Thank you so much.
Round 2, and the first question is the question that they received, the take-home question, so that they can give us a little bit more in-depth information on it. So, the question is, since you represent vastly different constituents throughout the district, pick 2 areas from the district and describe an economic initiative that you could apply in each area. Okay, I think.
Is it me?
Yeah, I think you started. Yeah.
Okay, great. So just to let you know what 2 areas I've selected. I've selected 2 areas that are very similar, so I put them together. That's East St. Louis and Cairo. And then I've also selected which is fitting. We should be looking at these areas because they're the most economically and socially challenged areas. And then of course, not of course, but I've also taken like Jackson County area where we've got a lot of agriculture and coal production. And I want to talk about those 2 areas in general. So first, let's start with East St. Louis and Cairo. We're talking about areas of our district that rank among the nation's poorest, specifically in areas like child poverty. Cairo ranks 6th in child poverty. 6th. And that's not something to be proud of, nothing we should laugh about. Okay? That's not something that we, as a country or as citizens of this district, should look and ignore. And the reasons why we've got these problems is because we're not focusing on two important areas. We've spent the last 3 decades focusing on community development in these areas. But we have not focused on economic development and in parallel safety. If we focus on economic development and safety at the same time, we would be able to actually do a lot for these areas. And I'm going to give you an example of safety. I've done a lot of canvassing in these areas, and there's this a project or development called 1235 McCausland. It's a very large group of homes in East St. Louis. And when you ask the citizens there, the constituents there, what do they feel about that area? And they say it's not safe. Then you ask, why is it not safe? Well, there's shooting. Where are the shootings come from? They're coming from people outside of outside of East St. Louis. They're actually people coming in and traveling in because there's no security. Ask them, why is there no security? Well, they're renting cops to protect the area. Why are they renting cops? Well, there's no budget for it. And they say, well, there are state marshals that come in and they put up postings. And I said, well, when do they come in? Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 2. So 4 hours a week, they've got the U.S. Marshals there providing security. So East St. Louis has got this growing crime problem that's not even theirs, and it's the poor that are actually being targeted by these crimes. And all they want is jobs. And nobody focuses on the security and the economy at the same time. So there's great programs like America's Scott over here has got an awesome program to develop IT and coding and other IT-based programs for kids in these communities. We can use these communities as centers for re-education, education in different trades, IT, and we're not talking about 4-year degrees. We're talking about simple certification programs. On the same time, we focus on security. So we bring these, we make these communities more secure, more economically sustainable, and then on top of that, what happens when you have security and economic sustainability, you can move businesses in here, and businesses feel safer moving here. All right, I'm getting 60 seconds to go to Jackson County and Toll Country. I mentioned earlier we've got resource curse. Okay, we can train and develop people. I know people are balking at the idea of retraining, and minors don't want to be retrained. They do, as long as it's in hands-on trades, as long as it's in trades that they feel like they're doing something that's worthwhile. I met with a solar installation company in Carbondale, and they specifically told me for $12 to $15 an hour, you can join an apprenticeship program to install solar panels. Within 3 to 6 months, you'll be making $20 an hour installing solar panels, and anybody can do it. Here's the thing. We just have to have the will to do it. We have to have the political will to do it. We have to stop being so focused on these resources that are a curse to us and start focusing on the people that are hurt when those resources aren't making money anymore.
It is. Yeah, the 3-minute limit.
We gave you 4 minutes. We gave you 4 minutes.
All right, well, thank you.
4 minutes is great. Thanks.
Room to stretch.
So, East St. Louis is an area which is near and dear to my heart. When I got out of law school and I got out of the Navy, the first place I went was East St. Louis, and I worked every day on 4700 State Street for State Representative Whitehead Young, where I learned a lot about the specifics of these challenges in terms of public housing. And some of these are very parallel to what's going on in Cairo. I've been battling with public housing in the East St. Louis Housing Authority ever since I've been the state's attorney. If you look at areas around the country where economic development was able to happen and to be successful, and you look at Washington Avenue in St. Louis, for example, what they did to revitalize that area and make it hospitable for economic development was completely redesigned and rethought what public housing is supposed to look like. If you look at Emerson Park, that place is 20 years old now. It's in great shape. That is what every unit of public housing should look like in the city of East St. Louis. If you stand in downtown East St. Louis and you just do a 360 rotation, you're going to see 4 different housing projects that some were built during World War I. That's how long the Gompers has been there. That's not the kind of environment that you're going to be able to have safety in because of the way they are designed, and they're not designed in a way that promotes safety or promotes an environment which is good for kids or promotes an environment which is attractive to business. being able to revitalize the city of East St. Louis and make it the community that it should be, and we all know that it has the potential to be, and to reach the potential of the people that live there, you have to start first and foremost with public housing. And what this current administration and what the folks in Congress have done now is just abandoned the East St. Louis housing. They are walking away from it. They're giving up on it. They're saying, we want local control. That is a ruse, folks, okay? They're simply saying, good luck. We're done with you. We're giving up on you. But there is resources through HUD to be able to redevelop those. There are people who have the skills, and there are companies out there that know how to do this and make that happen. In addition, in East St. Louis, we have to look at public safety infrastructure. You can't have public safety without public safety infrastructure. We have police departments in that area that have raw sewage leaking into the evidence room. People can't have trust in the criminal justice system if that's the conditions in which they see when they're dealing with their local police. You're not going to attract qualified, well-trained, and trustworthy individuals to work in the police department if that's the kind of building that they're going to work in. We have to rebuild that. In addition, in East St. Louis, we have an opportunity with the General Services Administration. Now look, this is really getting into the weeds, folks, okay? What is the GSA? Well, guess what? They do the planning for all federal buildings. If there's an FBI office in a strip mall, they've got to pay rent to somebody for that. If there's a Social Security office, which is in a building, the GSA will pay rent for that. If there's some other government service, a VA office, somebody pays rent for that. But right now, those facilities throughout this area are all spread all over the place. We have an opportunity to create federal hubs in one building where we can build new buildings, attractive buildings, like this U.S. Attorney's office over here, which is in Fairview. Well, the courthouse is down in the federal part of East St. Louis, the federal courthouse. We have an opportunity there, if we have a congressman that gives a damn and pays attention to what's going on, to make sure those things are all consolidated in a place that can be a focal point and a pillar for future economic development. That's a tremendous opportunity there. We also, in terms of our skills, in terms of the educational opportunities, we have to talk about how those are trauma-oriented for the East St. Louis community. Some of those things are the same as they are in East St. Louis, as they are in Cairo, so I won't repeat some of those things. But the Cairo Port District is a tremendous economic opportunity for us. Hopefully we'll have more time to get to that. I see my time is clicking down. But the other pillar in terms of economic development in this area, not just Scott Air Force Base, not just East St. Louis, but as a regional approach to the 12th Congressional District. And we can talk more about that hopefully in the next question. Thanks.
The Me Too movement has shined a light on sexual harassment at all levels. In Congress, we've now learned that taxpayers have paid over $17 million in settlements. Do you support ending the practice, and will you commit today to having gender parity on your staff?
I think it's yours first.
First of all, I think the question is, do you support, what was that again? In terms of the specific legislation?
Do you support ending the practice of taxpayers using, of congressmen using taxpayer money for settlements? And
well, I tell you, if someone works for a congressman and they've been sexually harassed and wronged, then we should pay them. If they've been aggrieved, then they have a right to that claim. They should. I mean, that's what an employer does. If someone commits sexual harassment, then they are under the law. They should be paid. What I don't like is hiding those. Yep. Those should be open. They should be transparent. We should know about that, and we shouldn't have these private secret settlements. Maybe that's what you're getting at, I hope. That's the way it should be done. If someone's been wronged and they are owed because they've been wronged, they should be paid. But we should know about it, and it shouldn't be hidden. In terms of gender parity, I will tell you, this is my experience as the state's attorney, not just in the support staff. If you look at the attorneys in my office, I have 20 female attorneys in my office and 12 men. And that's because those are the most qualified people that I've interviewed. And it wasn't based upon whether they were a man or a woman, but those are the best qualified people. And it's not just in, like I said, support staff or brand new attorneys. The leadership cadre that I have in my office, of the 7 people that are chiefs or supervisors, they are women. 5 of them are women out of those 7, because those are the people that can do the job, the best job. And so it's not parity in my office. It's more than parity. And if you look at how much they are paid, women, on the average pay rate in my office, women are paid higher than the men right now. Because that's what they are qualified to do. That's what they should receive, based on their experience, based on their skill. That's what they should be receiving. So if you want leaders in Congress that are going to do that, you have to have people and not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, and have done that in the way they've conducted business before, and that's what I will do.
So this is a great question because I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is this systemic problem with gender wage gap. And let's go to the first part so that I can go into that. Congressmen should not be using taxpayer dollars to pay the settlements. The settlements should be coming from the congressman's pocket, okay? And then the congressman should lose his job, because if he's doing a settlement, then he's wrong, right? The only reason you do a settlement in that case is because you've done something wrong, so you're gone, okay? There's no reason why that. If you had to get to a settlement point, you're gone and you pay it out of your pocket. Sorry, you abused your job, okay? That should not be a taxpayer burden. As far as the parity issue, this is systemic. This is our country we're talking about. Women make up 46% of our workforce, yet that only equals 1/5 of our GDP. 1/5. So they're half of our workforce, yet they are only 1/5 of our GDP. And I'm glad Brendan's office has it, but the rest of the country doesn't. We have a serious problem. Let's put it in numbers, right? It's 80 cents on the dollar for a woman. That's a white woman. If you go to an African American woman, that's 64 cents on the dollar. You go to a Latina, right? That's 53 cents on the dollar. We have a systemic problem, and it results in power. It results in this power play where women are earning less for doing the same work, so they're not as powerful. They don't have a voice economically. And this has resulted in vast amounts of sexual misconduct and inappropriate behavior in the workforce, because women are not being treated equally, and they're not given equal footing. And this can only be fixed if we as a country make it a resolution and a legislation to make sure that there's no wage gap. And it can happen. Iceland just did it a couple days ago. They just passed legislation making wage gap illegal. A company will be fined. They will lose their license if they're in some type of trade. You cannot have a wage gap. And we, as the most developed country in the world, as we believe, and as we should be, should not have a wage gap. Should not have a gender wage gap, should not have a racial wage gap, should not have any wage gap, period, and that's it.
The next question. Illinois had the nation's highest black unemployment rate in 2016 at 12.7%. That is double the state's unemployment rate. How do you plan to address this issue in a meaningful way?
This is an incredible question, and I think we need to always talk about this. We should also talk about it because we are the second most diverse district in this state outside of the 9 counties in Chicago. And here's the reality, folks. We've got a racial problem. We've got an inequality problem. And it's systemic. It's in so many areas, and a lot of it comes from the fact that we've, as a country, have criminalized poverty. We've made it a crime to be poor. We've made it a crime to be black. And we've done that in some of the most cruel and systematic ways. You get a speeding ticket, you pay $250. Yeah. If you can't afford a speeding ticket, you get a warrant. If you get a warrant, you've got a criminal record, okay? Now here's the reality. This only affects people who can't pay the speeding ticket. And who are the people that can't pay the speeding ticket? Poor people. And who are the most poor and impoverished people in our district? African Americans. We have a problem. We have a problem with the war on drugs, which also criminalizes poverty. We have a problem because we just won't come to the fact that it's 2017 and it's okay to legalize marijuana. It's okay to decriminalize marijuana. Because guess what? Cannabis is okay. If we don't, as a country, start going after these systemic problems that target the African American community, we're never going to get out of this hole. We're always going to have racial inequality. We're also going to have inequitable treatment for African American communities. You know, look at East St. Louis. We talked a lot about East St. Louis and development of East St. Louis, but the reality is that public money that goes into East St. Louis per head, per student, may be the same. But that's never going to help them because it's inequitable. They have decades to catch up. So unless we as a country develop legislation and funding, I'm talking serious cash money that goes into these neighborhoods and funds equitable programs, catching them up on education, catching them up on housing, catching them up on other areas. I'm not talking equality, guys. I'm talking equitable. There's a huge difference. Once we start doing those, and those are the types of programs I will fight for, then we can start working towards racial equality in this country. Thank you.
I think the question was economic, right?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. But everything that was just discussed, there's absolute merit to all of that. I think the circumstance we find ourselves in right now that we have to think about, particularly for us as Democrats as we're running, is that we have to fight to protect the programs and the civil rights achievements that were made over the past couple of decades, because they're going to try to roll them back, folks. Any chance that is given, whether it's through educational programs or it's through other types of assistance or other opportunities that are built in to be able to help African Americans climb up that ladder and be part of the American dream, they're going to try to attack every single one of those. So there is a long list of things that we still need to do, but I will tell you right now, we're on the defensive, and we have to get back on the offensive. And we will continue to be on the defensive as long as the folks who are in Congress now still control Congress. So we have to fight to protect those existing things that have been accomplished, those achievements that have been made in terms of equity, but then keep going. I think what the Attorney General Sessions, in terms of the guidance they just recently put out, the guidance that came after what occurred in recent years in our country that showed how we have used our court system to make money off of folks, rather than improving public safety, rather than having a fair consequence for someone who violates the law, that we have a tremendous problem in Illinois. And there are folks in my position and folks who are in law enforcement that they see the fundamental screwed upness of funding government with all these fines and fees and all these little things. That's not the way it should be done. And again, that goes back to tax policy, how we fund government. That's not the way it's supposed to work. There's been some bail reform recently in Illinois, and I think that's headed in the right direction. That's something I've supported as state's attorney in terms of equity. But I tell you what, one of the things that will help, not just with the gender wage gap, but also for African Americans and other people of color, is raising the minimum wage. Yeah. Folks that are impacted by that is an immediate help for many, many folks to making sure they have a livable wage. Anybody who's working full-time, if you work full-time and you can't live off of that, that's not just. That's not what this country is supposed to be about. And that would help African Americans, but it would also help with the gender gap. 77% of minimum wage earners are women, and the majority of those are African American. So if you were able to address that issue, then I think you'd be able to make some progress. That's one of many, many things. And the investment things we've talked about, the infrastructure, particularly in East St. Louis, those are all part of that. There's no silver bullet to that. It is a web of things. It is a net of things. It is a safety network that we can help lift people up out of poverty. It's going to take all those things working together. And certainly, again, we hope we get to be able to talk about it more. But trauma-informed education, trauma-informed skill development, trauma-informed socialization for people to be able to move forward in the community. We've got to talk about that more. It's something we are really, really missing and that we have to embrace.
Voter suppression tactics frequently target communities through economic impediments such as IDs that cost money and traveling to distant polling stations. how will you work to restore voting rights throughout the country?
Well, first of all, the legislation that they're pushing through Congress and some of the approaches that have been taken in our courts are not the right way, okay? There are people, I will tell you, as a prosecutor, who've tried to cheat in elections, okay? People cheat on their homework, they cheat on their taxes, they try to violate the law, and if we find evidence of that, they need to be prosecuted. But that doesn't mean we make it harder for people to be able to vote, okay? If someone is driving dangerously, okay, that doesn't mean we shut down the roads so nobody can drive, okay? We should make it easier for people to vote and have more opportunities to vote. We need to expand the ability to vote by mail. We need to have more opportunities in terms of early voting. And those barriers, those artificial barriers that are created, they are clearly voter suppression tactics, okay? It's nothing other than that. Just call it what it is. I will tell you, when we do, one of the things that informed me in terms of this voter ID issue, when we've done clean slate days in the community, in East St. Louis, these community courts, or Washington Park, Cahokia, anywhere throughout St. Clair County, the number of folks that come and they don't have a driver's license or an ID, or their social security card has fallen apart, or maybe they have a bill but they don't have this or that. There's a huge number of folks who are Americans. They are our fellow citizens. And the ability for them to go to some building, get a separate photo, and get another ID in order for them to be able to participate in what is the most fundamental right in this country, it's just not fair. It doesn't work. It's nothing other than a vote suppression tactic. So if you got people that are cheating and they're committing vote fraud, we prosecute them. That's the answer to that issue. But if they're not, we need to make it easier and make it the easiest thing for an American to do. If being an American was a religion, voting would be our most important sacrament, okay? That is the most important thing. That is how we participate in this thing. It is fundamental. And any barriers to that, particularly for those that are libertarian or those that are all over the political spectrum, no matter what's your point of view, we should be able to vote no matter what, okay? So we have to fight against those things. We have to call those things out and just say, look, we know what you're trying to do here. You're just trying to make it tougher. And that's not how it works. And we should make it easier for people in rural areas to vote. We should they're experimenting with all kinds of voting opportunities in different countries, in different states, out west, where you can do it online even, okay? There's a way we can ensure the integrity of this process, but make it easier for people to vote. And that's what we got to do. That's the direction we got to be headed in, because our voter participation is way too low. And that's why we find ourselves in the circumstance that we find her in. It's not make it easier make it hard for people to vote. We have to make it easier for them to vote and ensure the integrity of our system by doing that.
It would be hard not to repeat most of that. Voter suppression is obviously an issue that has been utilized, and unfortunately it's been utilized by both parties in some instances. And we need to look at our own district and take a very close look at how it really works. And one of the things that we've researched along the path, specifically when you're canvassing in certain areas, when you're going over voter lists, and you're understanding the relationship between where people are registered, where they were, is that there is research that proves that people of lower income, specifically minorities and people of color in general, that they move more. And they typically tend to move more in the impoverished areas that they're in. So maybe apartment to apartment, block to block, across the street. And what we realized during this process is that when they do that, their voter rights are gone. Because oftentimes they do something called a purging of the voter list. And they do this by, if you don't respond to a little postcard that says you've moved or you're there still, your vote is gone. You're no longer a registered voter. And you could still go to the poll and re-sign up, but if you sign a petition or you get active and your voice is supposed to count, you're not a registered voter. And this is a problem, because the problem affects only that targeted group. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect my parents. It doesn't affect almost all of white middle class America or upper middle class, certainly not the rich. They don't get postcards in the mail to their mansions saying, hey, did you move? Right? Nobody gets that. And if they don't respond, they don't get removed as registered voters. We do this, and we target these groups. And there's all kinds of voter suppression tactics. But the reality is that almost all of those tactics and all of our systems are so confusing and so, they're so manipulated to actually affect the most vulnerable voters in our societies, and that's who we need to protect. And I do want to say that, we do have a bill that's in act right now where people are supposed to be automatically registered as of August of 2017. I don't know where that's going. I don't know how fast it's going, but we should expect that the state of Illinois has every single person registered right now. I know it's supposed to be phased in, but we should expect more. It should be faster. It should be right now, and everybody should be registered to vote because that's the way it should work in this country.
Okay. On Tuesday, a homeless man was found frozen to death in a dumpster. With economic inequality on the rise and the recent tax bill only exacerbating it, how do you propose we protect the most vulnerable citizens through legislation?
All right, that's a tough question just because it's America, and we're talking about a person freezing to death in the streets of the richest country in the world. The richest country in the world had a man die on the street because he doesn't have a warm place to sleep. And at the same time, we're writing a tax scam bill that puts a $1.4 trillion debt into our system and enriches the rich. Does any of this make sense to you? Does any of this make sense to any of us? We should be writing a tax bill that takes care of the most vulnerable, that does not enrich the rich, that takes the most make sure that the most vulnerable are always taken care of. We should never be having a conversation about a man freezing to death, man, woman, child, anybody freezing to death. So how do we fight this? Well, first of all, we have to get rid of this tax bill. The first thing all of us need to do on November 2018, once we win, and then we're sworn in January, okay, is we need to get together and we need to write a tax bill, a new tax bill, that takes care of the most vulnerable in our society, gets us in the creation of going towards infrastructure, creation of jobs, and really gets us back on the path to being human. Makes us the greatest country in the world. We are the greatest country in the world when we write a tax bill that takes care of everybody. When we have great corporations paying their dues but employing people with good wages. Right? When we have Americans employed at high rates. So really, this is easy. We don't need anything more than new legislation or a new tax bill that takes care of every citizen of this country and not just the 1% and not just the richest.
I'm not sure we know that man's name yet. I'm not sure they've released it. I'm not sure we know what his story is. And I don't want to assume that we know what his story is or why he wound up there. But I think there are some things that he probably symbolically stands for. And if he is like those folks that we know are suffering from mental health issues that may wind up in his circumstances, we know that proper health care that includes coverage for mental health care, where we don't even have to say those two things separately. When you say health care, that includes mental health care all the time. Those are not separate things. This is an organ just like anything else, just like your heart or your lungs or your liver or your stomach. And we have to start thinking that way as a country. If we're going to take care of somebody and provide health care, that should always include mental health care. That's not a bonus, okay? That's not a special thing in terms of health care. That should be part of it. But fundamental to that, foundational to that, access to proper health care, is making sure that we don't gut the Affordable Care Act And they keep trying to do it, and they're going to keep trying to do it until we get voted in and we stop it from happening. We have to stop them. Mike Bost, our current representative, voted to cut health care to 38,000 people in this district. That's not one homeless guy who may be suffering with some mental health issues. That's everyone in this room that is potentially affected by that decision, by that poor decision, which could make us all vulnerable, make us all weaker, undermine the fundamental things that we need as a people. So it's not just that homeless guy that's put at risk by that decision. I would also make sure that within healthcare we are providing treatment for drug addiction. Again, I don't want to assume what's going on with this guy that passed away, this human being who lost his life and froze to death. But there are chances are that guys like him in this circumstance who may have had a mental health issue, but also an addiction issue. And that's got to be part of our healthcare coverage. And you don't expand that, and you don't take care of people in that situation, or people like this in this very room, by cutting the Affordable Care Act, by continually trying to gut it. We have to stabilize it. And we have to also look at expanding Social Security, not tearing it down and tearing it apart and privatizing it and breaking the promise that people who paid into Social Security were made by their government. There is a ruse out there, there are lies out there where they are trying to tell you Social Security is about to fall apart. It's not true. It's not true. Those are not the facts. That's the biggest fake news that we have right now, that they're going to use to try to justify Social Security being torn apart. We can't do that. Otherwise, we're going to see more people die in the streets of the United States, not just from freezing to death, but for a number of reasons. So we've got to fight that by addressing those particular things.
Okay, this is the end of round two. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Yeah, there's more. One more. One more. You're 2/3 done.
All right.